In a world devastated by a mysterious zombie outbreak, small pockets of survivors cling to life in isolated shelters. Jake, a former radio technician, intercepts a faint, cryptic transmission on an old shortwave radio, a message from someone claiming to have found a way to stop the infection. Intrigued and desperate, Jake sets out on a risky journey to trace the source of the transmission, hoping it might hold the key to saving what's left of dead America. Part 2: Echoes of the Past. Jake's journey leads him to abandoned towns and forgotten military outposts, where he uncovers clues about the early days of the outbreak. Flashbacks reveal how the transmission began, broadcasted by a scientist trapped in a government bunker. Meanwhile, hostile survivor groups and roaming infected complicate Jake's mission. Part 3: The Lost Scientist. Following the trail, Jake finally locates the bunker, only to discover it's not as abandoned as he thought. A small group of survivors protects the scientist's work, but trust is fragile. Jake must prove his intentions as tensions rise, and the threat of zombies grows closer. Part 4: Decoding Hope. Inside the bunker, Jake and the survivors work together to decode the transmission's data. They uncover a potential cure, but it requires rare ingredients scattered across dangerous zones. The group plans a perilous expedition to gather these components while fending off both undead and human threats. Part 5: The Gathering Storm. As Jake and a small team venture out, they face harrowing challenges, including zombie hordes and betrayal from within their own ranks. Meanwhile, the other survivors defend the bunker, preparing for an inevitable siege from a massive zombie horde attracted by the recent activity. Part 6: The Siege. The bunker is surrounded. Jake's team races against time to return with the necessary ingredients. The defenders hold out with dwindling resources, facing emotional and physical tolls. The story explores themes of sacrifice, hope, and human resilience. Part 7: The Final Transmission. Jake returns just in time. The group synthesizes the cure, but testing it comes with risks. The scientist sends one last transmission, a heartfelt message to the scattered survivors of dead America, urging unity and perseverance. Suspense builds as they face one final zombie onslaught. Part 8: A New Dawn. The cure is distributed, and signs of recovery begin. Survivors start to rebuild, cautiously optimistic about the future. Jake reflects on the journey and the message in the wind that rekindled hope in a seemingly lost world, setting the stage for a new chapter in dead America. Part 1: The Silent Signal, 795 words. The world had long since fallen silent. Cities that once roared with life now lay in ruins, overrun by twisted remnants of humanity, creatures driven by instinct, hunger, and the terrible curse of the outbreak. For years, the few survivors had learned to keep quiet, to hide in shadows, and to avoid the wandering hordes that stalked the empty streets of what was once called America. Jake sat hunched over his radio equipment, the flickering green light of the shortwave receiver the only sign of life in his small shelter deep within the Appalachian Mountains. The shelter was crude but safe, fashioned from scavenged wood and metal scraps, insulated against the biting cold of a world gone dark. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees like a ghost's lament. Jake had spent countless hours tuning the dial, chasing faint signals amid the static noise. Most broadcasts were empty or repetitive, the echoes of desperate messages from long-lost survivors. But tonight, something was different. A low, rhythmic pulse cut through the static like a heartbeat. His fingers tightened on the radio knobs as he adjusted frequencies, the faint sound growing clearer. It was a voice, a calm, measured voice speaking in code, fragments of a message that hinted at hope, a solution, something that could change everything. Repeat, this is Dr. Landon, hope remains, coordinates, safety, cure, end the night. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. The name Dr. Landon was whispered among survivors like a legend, a scientist rumored to have been working on a cure before the world fell apart. No one had heard from him in years. The transmission was faint, barely audible over the static, but Jake recorded it carefully. His mind raced. Could this be the chance they had been waiting for? Could someone really have found a way to end the nightmare? He stood up, pacing the cramped room as memories flooded back, of lost friends, shattered cities, and endless nights spent fighting for survival. The outbreak had changed everything, turning neighbors into monsters and hope into a scarce commodity. But now, here was a sign. A message in the wind, carried across the broken airwaves, promising something more than just survival. It promised a future. Jake grabbed his worn leather jacket and a battered backpack filled with essentials, batteries, canned food, a small knife, and his old radio gear. He knew the journey ahead would be perilous. The coordinates in the message pointed toward a region long abandoned, overrun by infected and lawless survivor gangs. But he couldn't ignore it. Not when the possibility of a cure dangled just out of reach. Before leaving, Jake scribbled a note and taped it to the wall of his shelter. If you find this, know there is hope. A message in the wind may save us all. He paused at the entrance, the cold night air biting his skin. Somewhere out there, Dr. Landon's voice was calling across the darkness. And Jake was determined to answer. As he stepped into the shadows, the wind shifted, carrying with it the distant howl of the infected. The world was dangerous and broken, but tonight, something inside Jake ignited, a spark of determination that refused to die. This was only the beginning. If you want, I can continue with part 2 next or help you adjust the story any way you like. Jake moved cautiously through the skeletal remains of what once had been a bustling town, now silent except for the occasional distant groan that reminded him why this world had fallen apart. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows over shattered windows and rusted vehicles. The air smelled faintly of smoke and decay, a constant reminder of the chaos that had swept through dead America. Following the faint coordinates encoded in the transmission, Jake kept his old radio close, periodically scanning for any sign of the mysterious signal. The message had come with a pattern, repeated bursts of static punctuated by cryptic words. It was unlike anything he had encountered before, and despite the risks, hope kept him moving forward. He passed an overturned school bus, its paint chipped and faded, the windows broken out. Memories of laughter and children's voices haunted him, but he pushed them aside. There was no time for sentimentality when every step could mean danger. The outbreak had come fast, and the government had collapsed almost overnight. Military convoys had left behind wreckage and hastily abandoned posts, some with warning signs still visible: quarantine zone, restricted area. Jake had heard stories about those early days, how the virus spread like wildfire, turning neighbor against neighbor. No one had really understood what had caused it or how to stop it. Most survivors only knew to run, hide, or fight. But this transmission hinted at something more: a plan, a hope, a scientist's desperate attempt to reach out. As he neared the edge of the town, Jake found what looked like an old military checkpoint, rusted barricades half collapsed but still standing guard over the road ahead. He checked carefully for signs of life. No infected lurked nearby, but the faint tracks in the dust suggested others had passed through recently, perhaps other survivors, or worse, hostile groups known to prey on travelers. He crouched behind a fallen street lamp, pulling out a folded map he had marked with the transmission's coordinates. The signal was strongest in this direction, leading deeper into the forest where the trees thickened and the ruins gave way to nature's slow reclaiming. Suddenly, a soft crack echoed from the underbrush. Jake froze, gripping his knife tightly. His breath came shallow as a shadow moved. A lone figure emerged, a young woman, cautious eyes scanning the horizon. "Wait. I'm not infected," she said quickly, hands raised. "Are you following the signal too?" Jake nodded, relief washing over him. "Yeah. I'm Jake." "And you are?" "Emily," she replied, stepping closer. "I heard it too. I've been following it for days. They say it comes from a bunker not far from here, a place where Dr. Landon might still be alive." Jake studied her carefully. Survivors had learned to be wary. Trust was a rare currency in dead America. But there was something genuine in Emily's eyes. Someone who shared the same desperate hope. Together, they pressed onward toward the forest's edge. The sun climbed higher, but the shadows grew thicker beneath the dense canopy. They moved quietly, listening for any sign of danger. The infected weren't the only threat, other survivors could be just as deadly, driven by fear and hunger. Emily told Jake what she knew: the transmission had started as a faint, irregular pulse, barely noticeable. Then it became clearer, repeating coordinates and fragments of a message about a cure. She had lost her group weeks ago and had been traveling alone since. "Do you think it's real?" Jake asked. "The cure, I mean." Emily hesitated, then said, "I want to believe it. But the world has lied to us before. Still, something about that message feels different." As they navigated the forest, flashbacks wove through Jake's mind, memories of before the outbreak, when the world still made sense. He remembered his family, lost in the early chaos, and the promise he had made to survive no matter what. Suddenly, Emily stopped, raising a finger to her lips. Ahead, the faint outline of a concrete structure peeked through the trees, a bunker entrance, half buried and covered with vines. The place looked abandoned, but the fresh footprints leading inside told a different story. Jake's pulse quickened. They had found the bunker. But just as they approached, a sudden noise shattered the stillness, a low growl followed by a guttural snarl. From behind a nearby tree, a group of infected emerged, their eyes glazed and hungry. Without hesitation, Jake grabbed a nearby branch and swung it with all his might, buying time as Emily pulled out a small pistol. The infected staggered but kept coming, relentless in their pursuit. "Run!" Jake shouted, grabbing Emily's arm. They sprinted toward the bunker entrance, the sound of shuffling feet close behind. Inside the bunker, the heavy steel door groaned shut just in time, sealing them in darkness. Their breaths came fast, pounding in their ears as they fumbled for a light source. Emily clicked on a flashlight, illuminating the narrow corridor ahead. The air smelled stale but safer than the forest. The walls were lined with peeling paint and old signs, warnings about biological hazards and quarantine protocols. "This must be it," Emily whispered. "Dr. Landon's last known base." Jake nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and fear. The message in the wind had led them here, but now the real journey would begin. As they moved deeper into the bunker's cold interior, shadows danced on the walls. Somewhere, hidden in the darkness, secrets waited, answers that could change everything, or doom them all. "Would you like me to continue with part 3 next?" The bunker's heavy door sealed behind Jake and Emily with a final clang that echoed through the narrow corridor. The faint hum of their flashlights cut through the thick darkness, revealing peeling metal walls and long-abandoned equipment covered in dust and cobwebs. The air was stale, carrying a faint chemical scent, a reminder of the experiments and lives once contained here. Jake's heart pounded as he stepped carefully, every footfall sounding loud in the silence. The bunker was supposed to be the last hope, the place where Dr. Landon, the scientist behind the mysterious transmission, had been working on a cure. But how much had survived? And what else had been left behind? Emily led the way, her flashlight sweeping over faded signs marked Biohazard Level 4 and Restricted Access. She paused in front of a heavy control panel, dust and rust caking the buttons and switches. She wiped the grime away, then pressed a series of worn keys. For a moment, nothing happened, then the dull whir of machinery stirred to life, lights flickering on along the corridor. "That's a good sign," Jake said, glancing at the now illuminated passage. "Power's still running, at least partially." Emily nodded. Dr. Landon must have rigged this place to keep going without outside help. But how long? They moved cautiously deeper into the bunker, past rows of empty laboratories and abandoned offices. Shattered glass and overturned chairs hinted at a hurried evacuation, or worse, a violent struggle. Jake's eyes caught strange markings on the walls, tally marks, dates, and scribbled messages like, "Hope is fading," and, "They're coming." A shiver ran down Jake's spine. Whoever had been here last had been trapped, desperate to survive. As they entered the main laboratory, Emily stopped abruptly. On the table lay a cracked tablet, its screen faintly glowing. She picked it up, brushing off the dirt, and activated it. A series of encrypted files appeared, protected by a password. Dr. Landon must have secured his research, Emily murmured, scanning the options. If we can crack this, we might find what he was working on. Jake crouched beside her, pulling out a small hacking device he'd scavenged months ago. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding, document." Minutes passed in tense silence as Jake worked on bypassing the encryption. Suddenly, the tablet beeped, "Access granted." The screen filled with notes, video logs, and detailed scientific data. Emily's eyes widened as she began to read aloud. Virus strain X9. Mutation accelerated by unknown environmental factors. Antidote formula incomplete. Transmission initiated as last resort. The pieces were falling into place. Dr. Landon had been close to a breakthrough, but something had gone wrong. The transmission Jake had heard was his final message, a desperate plea for help and hope. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed from deeper within the bunker, a soft thud followed by a distant groan. Both Jake and Emily froze, their flashlights flickering nervously. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered. Jake nodded. "We're not alone down here." They moved toward the sound, weapons drawn. As they rounded a corner, they spotted a figure slumped against the wall, a man, ragged and weak, but alive. His eyes flickered open as they approached. "Thank God," he rasped. "I'm Dr. Landon." Relief and disbelief washed over Jake and Emily. The scientist who had sent the message was alive, trapped in the bunker all this time. Dr. Landon's voice was weak but urgent. "The virus mutated faster than we anticipated. It wasn't just a virus, it adapted, evolved. That's why the antidote never fully worked." Jake exchanged a grim look with Emily. "So what's the plan? How do we stop it?" Landon shook his head. "We can't stop it, not yet. But we can control it. I've been working on a secondary project, a way to communicate with infected hosts. To calm the mutation, slow the spread. But I need help." The transmission was a call for backup, for someone like you. Jake's mind raced. "You want us to join you?" Emily stepped forward. "We don't have a choice. If there's even a chance to save what's left of this world, we have to take it." As Landon explained his plan, the groans grew louder, echoing through the corridors. The infected were closing in, drawn by the noise. With renewed determination, Jake, Emily, and Landon prepared to face whatever horrors lurked in the shadows of the bunker. Their mission was clear: unlock the secrets of the virus and send a new message, one that might just save dead America. But the clock was ticking. And outside, the world was still falling apart. "Would you like me to continue with part 4 now?" The trio moved deeper into the bunker, the faint hum of the old ventilation system their only companion in the eerie silence. Jake's senses were on high alert, every creak of metal, every distant moan, made his pulse race. This place was a tomb for many, but now it was their battlefield. Dr. Landon, though weak, guided them with shaky hands toward a heavily secured door at the far end of the corridor. "This leads to the containment lab," he explained. "Where we kept the virus samples and where I developed the communication project." Emily glanced at the keypad next to the door. "Looks like it needs a code." Landon's tired eyes flickered. "The code is embedded in the transmission. It's a sequence of numbers I used as a key. 7-4-2-9. Jake punched the numbers in carefully. The door groaned as it unlocked and slid open, revealing a large sterile room lined with high-tech equipment, long dormant. Monitors flickered weakly, showing static images of the outside world, twisted, ruined landscapes, frozen in time. In the center of the lab was a metal table cluttered with vials, syringes, and a strange-looking device that hummed faintly, the communicator. "This is the key," Landon said, wheezing as he moved toward it. "If we can use this device to interface with the infected, maybe we can slow down the mutation, even control it." Emily eyed the communicator, her fingers twitching near her pistol. "But how? How do you talk to the infected?" Landon smiled faintly. "The virus alters the brain's neural pathways. The communicator sends a low-frequency signal designed to disrupt the mutated signals, to calm the hosts." Jake's mind raced. "If this works, we could buy time. We could rebuild." Suddenly, an alarm blared through the bunker, loud and urgent. Red lights flashed, casting long shadows across the walls. The infected were getting closer. "We don't have much time," Landon said, voice urgent. "Help me set this up." Emily and Jake sprang into action, unpacking equipment and connecting wires. The communicator pulsed softly as power coursed through its circuits. Jake glanced nervously at the door, a groan echoed outside, followed by scraping claws. The bunker trembled as something heavy slammed against the entrance. The infected were relentless. "We need to get this signal out," Landon said, struggling to stay on his feet. "It has to reach the entire zone, every infected host." Jake tapped the communicator's controls, adjusting frequencies, trying to match the pattern from the original transmission. Emily kept watch, weapon ready. Suddenly, the monitors flickered to life, showing outside feeds of the infected crowd moving erratically, some pausing, heads tilting as if listening. "Is it working?" Emily whispered. Landon nodded weakly. "Yes, but it's unstable. The virus fights back, it's like a storm inside their brains." As the signal broadcasted, the infected slowed, some collapsing, others groaning less aggressively. A moment of eerie calm settled. Then, a terrible noise echoed from behind, a loud crash as the infected broke through a secondary door. A wave of snarling creatures surged forward. Jake raised his makeshift weapon, shouting, "Hold them off. We need more time." Emily fired carefully, buying precious seconds as Landon tried to recalibrate the communicator to strengthen the signal. "We're running out of power," Landon said, sweat pouring down his face. "I need to access the generator room to stabilize it." Jake grabbed Landon's arm. "I'll cover you." Emily nodded, eyes fierce. "We stick together. No one gets left behind." As Landon limped toward the generator room, Jake and Emily prepared to defend the lab. The infected pushed harder, their snarls turning desperate. Jake's breath was ragged as he fought off the closest attackers, swinging a metal pipe with all his strength. Emily's shots rang out, steady and precise. But for every one they took down, two more took their place. Suddenly, the communicator beeped wildly. The signal was fluctuating, losing strength. Landon's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm almost there. Just a little more time." Jake gritted his teeth. "Hold on, document. We've got this." Emily fired at a snarling infected that lunged too close, then ducked as a heavy body slammed against the wall. Outside the generator room, Landon reached the controls, fingers trembling as he adjusted power levels. Lights flickered and stabilized. The communicator pulsed brighter, sending a stronger wave through the bunker's speakers. Back in the lab, the infected faltered again, some retreating, confused by the signal. Jake exhaled deeply. "It's working, but we can't keep this up forever." Emily glanced toward the dimly lit hallway. "We need to send a new transmission, one that reaches beyond this bunker. A message for all survivors, a beacon of hope." Landon nodded weakly. "Yes. We have the data, the formula, but the world needs to hear it." Together, they prepared to broadcast the new transmission, knowing the danger outside was far from over. The fate of dead America rested on their shoulders, and on a message carried by the wind. Would you like me to continue with Part 5? The bunker's dim corridors were alive with tension as Jake, Emily, and Dr. Landon prepared for the broadcast. The communicator, now pulsing steadily, stood as their fragile lifeline to the outside world, a beacon in the endless darkness of the apocalypse. Jake adjusted the microphone, his fingers trembling slightly. This has to be clear. No mistakes. Emily nodded, her eyes sharp and alert. People are listening. If this works, it could save lives, maybe even rebuild what's been lost. Dr. Landon, though visibly exhausted, took a deep breath. I'll start with the scientific data, simplified enough for everyone to understand, but detailed enough for those who can help. Jake glanced at Emily. And I'll record a message, one of hope. We need to remind survivors they're not alone. As Landon spoke into the microphone, his voice steady but worn, he explained the nature of the virus, how it had evolved beyond initial understanding, how the communicator's signal could influence the infected's mutated neural pathways, slowing their aggression and perhaps reversing the infection over time. Emily watched the monitors showing the infected's reaction, some slowing, others collapsing peacefully. The signal was working in real time, but the battle wasn't over. Outside the bunker, the infected still roamed in terrifying numbers. Jake's voice followed, calm but determined. He urged survivors to find safe zones, avoid large groups of infected, and listen for the communicator's signal, a sign that help was on the way. We're not giving up, Jake said. Not yet. Together, we can survive. Together, we can fight back. Suddenly, a crackling noise interrupted the broadcast. Static surged through the speakers, and then a distorted voice broke through. Help, outpost, need evac, coordinates. Emily's eyes widened. Is that a response? Dr. Landon's tired face lit up with a flicker of hope. There are others out there. Survivors trying to communicate. Jake grabbed the radio receiver. We have to get their coordinates. If they're close, maybe we can join forces. The static cleared for a moment, revealing faint coordinates, a remote military outpost several miles from the bunker, surrounded by dense forest and rough terrain. Emily frowned. That's risky. The infected are everywhere. But if it's a safe zone, we have to try. Landon nodded weakly. The more survivors, the better chance we have. They prepared for the journey. Jake gathered supplies, weapons, food, and the communicator itself. Emily checked their gear and scanned the bunker's map, plotting the safest route. We don't know what's waiting out there, Jake warned. We'll have to be careful. As they stepped out into the bunker's main corridor, a heavy silence greeted them. The red emergency lights cast eerie shadows, making every corner look like a hiding place for danger. Suddenly, a distant crash echoed through the bunker. The infected had regrouped, pounding at the reinforced doors with renewed fury. Move! Emily urged. They raced through the labyrinthine halls, ducking under fallen pipes and squeezing through narrow passages. The communicator beeped softly, its signal guiding them toward the surface exit. Finally, a hatch opened to the outside world, a gray, overcast sky stretched above them, the ruins of a broken city barely visible beyond the trees. Jake breathed in the cold air, feeling a mix of hope and dread. Welcome to dead America, he muttered. The forest around them was silent, too silent. The ground was littered with abandoned vehicles and scattered supplies, signs of others who had passed this way. Emily pointed toward a faint plume of smoke in the distance. That must be the outpost. They moved cautiously, every rustle of leaves or snapping twig making their hearts race. The infected were still out there, lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, a low growl sounded behind them. Jake spun, weapon raised, just in time to see a snarling figure lunging from the underbrush. With a swift, practiced motion, he knocked the creature down, and it collapsed into a lifeless heap. Emily helped him steady his breath. That was too close. As they pressed forward, the outpost came into view, a makeshift fortress surrounded by barricades and watchtowers. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their eyes wary but hopeful. The gate swung open, revealing a small group of survivors huddled around a fire, faces drawn and tired but alive. "Jake! Emily," a voice called out. A woman stepped forward, her expression a mix of relief and determination. "We heard your broadcast. We thought we were alone." Jake smiled faintly. "You're not. Not anymore." As they entered the outpost, Jake felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in months: hope. But the fight was far from over. The virus was still out there, evolving. The infected were relentless. Undead America was still a land of shadows and danger. Yet, for the first time in a long while, there was a chance. A message in the wind, carried across the ruins, reaching those who dared to listen. "Would you like me to continue with Part 6? The outpost was a fragile oasis amid the chaos of dead America. Jake, Emily, and Dr. Landon were quickly introduced to the survivors, a small but determined group of scientists, soldiers, and civilians who had managed to carve out a semblance of safety within the reinforced walls. Their leader, Captain Reyes, was a sharp-eyed woman who had seen too much but refused to lose hope. She listened intently as Landon recounted the details of the communicator and the new broadcast signal. "This technology could change everything," Reyes said, her voice steady but cautious. "But we need proof it works beyond the bunker. The infected are evolving fast. If this signal can slow them down, maybe even reverse the mutation, it's our best shot." Emily scanned the faces of the survivors. They were exhausted, worn down by loss, but in their eyes, she saw the same spark she felt, the will to survive, to fight. "We'll need to extend the broadcast," Landon said. "The communicator's power is limited. If we can get to the old radio tower north of here, we can amplify the signal and reach a much larger area." Reyes nodded. "That tower is heavily fortified, but also overrun in places. The infected use the ruins like a maze." Jake ran a hand through his hair, considering the risk. "We don't have a choice. If the message can save lives, we have to try." That night, around a flickering campfire, the group prepared for the mission ahead. Maps were spread out, weapons checked, and plans made. Emily felt a pang of doubt. What if the infected figure out the signal? Could it make them more aggressive? Landon shook his head. "The virus isn't conscious. It's a biological response. But yes, there's always a risk of mutation. We have to move quickly and adapt." Jake tightened his grip on his weapon. "We've faced worse. We'll get to that tower and make this work." Before dawn, the team set out, moving quietly through the ruins. The once bustling city was now a graveyard of broken streets and abandoned vehicles, the air thick with decay and silence. As they approached the radio tower, the survivors split into two groups, Jake and Emily leading the way to the base, while Reyes and others provided cover from the outskirts. The tower loomed ahead, half-collapsed but still standing, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the gray sky. Thick vines and rust covered the metal, but it was intact enough to be functional. Suddenly, a noise from the shadows, low growls and shuffling feet. The infected were near. Jake motioned for silence. "Stay close. Move slow." They slipped through broken fences and over debris, hearts pounding as the infected emerged from the shadows, some slow and shambling, others quick and vicious. Emily fired carefully, taking down a snarling figure, while Jake covered their backs. At the tower's base, they found the entrance barricaded with heavy metal and debris. Reyes joined them, nodding toward the old service hatch. "This is the only way in," she whispered. Jake and Emily cleared the rubble, muscles straining as the infected pressed closer. Inside, the tower's stairwell was dark and narrow. Dust hung in the air as they ascended, each step echoing in the silence. Reaching the control room, Landon immediately went to work. The equipment was outdated but salvageable. He hooked up the communicator to the tower's main transmitter, fingers flying over controls. "We should be able to boost the signal across 100 miles, maybe more," he said, eyes focused. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. Emily spun around, weapon drawn. From the shadows stepped a figure, a survivor, gaunt and desperate, eyes wild. "Don't trust him," the stranger hissed, nodding at Landon. Jake frowned. "Who are you?" The man's voice trembled. "I'm with a group trying to take over what's left. They don't want this signal broadcast. They want control." Emily's heart sank. They weren't just fighting the infected, they were up against humans who had lost their morality. Landon took a step forward. "We're trying to save what's left of humanity." The stranger laughed bitterly. "Humanity's dead. You're wasting your time." Before they could react, the door rattled violently, infected pounding from outside, drawn by the noise. "We have to hold them off," Jake shouted. Emily barricaded the door with whatever she could find as Landon intensified the broadcast. The infected howled in frustration as the signal disrupted their senses, some collapsing. But the power was unstable. The stranger's presence was a dangerous wild card. Jake looked at Emily, determination in his eyes. "We finish this now, or we die trying." As the signal pulsed, echoing through the ruins, the battle for dead America was far from over, but hope flickered, fragile and fierce, like a message carried by the wind. "Would you like me to continue with Part 7? The claustrophobic control room echoed with tension. Jake kept his weapon trained on the desperate stranger, while Emily reinforced the barricade with whatever heavy equipment she could push in front of the door. Dr. Landon's fingers moved rapidly across the radio controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. The signal was spreading, its pulsing waves flowing out over the desolate city and the darkened forests beyond. Some infected nearby slowed, their aggression dimming as the broadcast worked its mysterious biological magic. But the danger was far from over. Suddenly, the stranger lunged toward Landon, a sudden violent move that caught everyone off guard. Jake reacted instantly, tackling the man to the ground. "Why are you really here?" he demanded, pinning the stranger's arms. The man spat, gritting his teeth. "You don't understand. My group, the Revenants, control the strongest survivors left. We can rebuild society, but only under our terms. That signal? It threatens our power." Emily's eyes narrowed. "So you're willing to let people die just to keep control? Survival is about power. Without power, there's no future," the man sneered. Jake exchanged a look with Emily. They couldn't afford to lose the transmitter, or the signal. Outside, the pounding grew louder as the infected redoubled their assault, drawn in by the noise of the struggle. The signal was effective, but only within a limited range. "We need to end this," Jake said, tightening his grip. Suddenly, the control panel sparked, and the transmitter began to falter. "Power's failing," Landon warned. "If this goes down, so does the broadcast." Emily glanced toward the door. "I can't hold them off alone much longer." Jake's mind raced. He remembered the backup generators they'd passed on the way up. "There's a generator room 2 floors down. If we can get it running, maybe we can stabilize the power." The stranger snarled, twisting beneath Jake's hold. "You won't get out alive." Jake tightened his grip again, ignoring the threat. "Emily, stay here and keep the signal going as long as you can." "I'm going for the generator." Emily hesitated but nodded. "Be careful." Jake slipped out through a side door and began his descent. The infected were already clawing at the stairwell's railing. He moved quickly but cautiously, every noise threatening to give away his position. Meanwhile, Emily focused on the broadcast. She adjusted the frequency, hoping to reach more survivors, even if only faintly. The flickering signal was a lifeline in the oppressive silence of the undead world. Back in the generator room, Jake fumbled with the ancient equipment. Dust and rust coated every surface. His fingers found the switches and valves, and slowly, the machine roared to life. The lights in the control room flickered back on. Emily smiled faintly as the transmitter stabilized. Suddenly, the door behind her crashed open. The stranger lunged at her with a knife, desperate and wild. Emily dodged, barely, and fought back fiercely. The struggle was brutal, the confined room offering no escape. Outside the control room, Jake heard the commotion and raced back, hearing Emily's shouts. He burst in just in time to tackle the stranger again. "This ends now," Jake growled, holding the man down. Emily caught her breath, eyes fierce. "You're not going to stop this signal. Not today." The stranger glared up, defeated but unbroken. "You're fools. This world belongs to the strong, and the dead." Landon, steady now, resumed his work on the transmitter. The signal surged stronger, reaching further across dead America. The infected outside slowed, some collapsing peacefully. The survivors in the outpost cheered quietly as the signal's reach expanded, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Jake looked at Emily and Landon, determination burning in his eyes. "We have to get this message out everywhere. The more survivors hear it, the more chances we have." Emily nodded. "But we need to be ready. More threats are coming, from both the infected and the living." As the radio waves carried their message across the ruined land, the fight for humanity's future continued. But for the first time, there was a chance, a whisper on the wind that maybe, just maybe, dead America could be saved. Would you like me to proceed with Part 8, the final part? Part 8, Hope on the Horizon. The air was heavy with tension as the last traces of the broadcast pulsed across dead America. The survivors inside the outpost gathered near the radio tower's control room, eyes fixed on the flickering monitors and the crackling speakers that carried the fragile message of hope. Jake stood beside Emily and Dr. Landon, exhaustion tugging at his every muscle. Months of running, hiding, fighting, it all came down to this moment. The transmission was out there now, reaching pockets of survivors scattered across the wasteland. "We did it," Emily whispered, though her voice carried the weight of uncertainty. Landon nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's not over, but it's a start. The signal has already disrupted the infected in nearby zones. If we keep it going, maybe we can slow the spread, even reverse the mutation in some areas." Captain Reyes approached, her usual steely demeanor softened by a rare smile. "Your discovery could change everything. But we have to prepare. The revenants, those who tried to stop you, they won't give up easily. They want control, and they'll come for us." Jake tightened his grip on his weapon. "Then we'll be ready." Outside the tower, the infected stirred uneasily. Some had begun wandering away, confused by the signal's interference. For the first time in months, there was movement, not the relentless advance of the undead, but a cautious retreat. Across the ruined city, radios began picking up the message. Survivors huddled in basements and makeshift shelters, their eyes lighting up as they heard the call for hope. In one small town, a group of former farmers listened intently. Their leader, an older woman with a fierce spirit, clutched the radio tightly. "We're not alone anymore," she said, determination shining through her tired face. "We have to move. We have to fight." Back at the outpost, Jake and Emily worked with the survivors to strengthen defenses, share supplies, and prepare for the inevitable attacks. The Revenant's shadow loomed larger every day, a threat not just from the infected but from those who had given in to fear and cruelty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake found a quiet moment with Emily. The sky burned with fiery reds and purples, a stark contrast to the ruined world around them. "We've come so far," Emily said softly. But the real battle is just beginning. Jake nodded. We're not just fighting to survive anymore. We're fighting for a future. Landon joined them, holding a small device, the communicator. This little thing may be our most powerful weapon. If we can replicate it, distribute it, maybe we can turn the tide. Emily smiled faintly. A message in the wind, carrying hope to the forgotten. Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed through the night, a reminder that danger was never far. Reyes' voice crackled over the radio. We've spotted a large group of revenants moving toward the outpost. They're coming. Jake's jaw clenched. Then we fight. For everyone who still believes. The survivors rallied, ready to defend the fragile beacon of hope they'd built. The undead were no longer the only enemy, human darkness threatened to snuff out the light. But the signal continued to broadcast, a steady pulse in the night, calling out to the lost, the brave, and the hopeful. In a world overrun by shadows, that message was everything. And as long as it lived, so did the chance that dead America could rise again. The story ends on a note of cautious optimism, with hope alive despite the darkness, perfectly suited for a suspenseful and engaging audiobook or YouTube narrative. Would you like me to help with anything else related to this story?